Hey, and welcome to the Vita versus 3DS 2012 year in review. In this video, we are going to compare the Vita and the 3DS in various aspects throughout 2012, and these aspects will include, in specific order, sales numbers, game reviews, notable additions, and then I'll go on to talk about predictions for 2013. So, on to sales. The sales analysis of this section will only include Japan and North America, as they are the only two areas that we have access to somewhat complete numbers for 3DS and Vita. Only hardware sales will be tallied and discussed in North America, since software sales only really provide ordinal rankings, not really any quality actual numbers. The software sales in Japan, it's also important to note, they don't include digital sales either. So we only really get part of the slice, but it's the most important part. The retail dwarfs digital sales, at least for now. So in North America, sales will be analyzed from February 2012 to November 2012. February was chosen as opposed to January since the Vita only launched in February, and it wouldn't be really fair to include an extra month for the 3DS. So the total amount of PlayStation Vitas and 3DSs sold in North America are as follows. PlayStation Vita has sold 1,033,000 units in North America, while the 3DS has sold 1,996,000 units in North America. So basically, the Vita sold just over a million units in 10 months, while the 3DS has sold just fewer than 2 million units in 10 months. The 3DS outsold the Vita in every single month since the North American launch of the Vita, but by varying degrees, with some months being very close, like February and March, while other months were complete blowouts, like September and October. December should follow the trend of November, so by when the year is all said and done, when the December numbers come in, the 3DS should sell roughly just probably over twice the amount of PlayStation Vitas that have sold in North America. So now on to Japan. The sales for Japan will be analyzed from January 1st through December 23rd. As mentioned before, Japan offers the actual sales number for software, so they'll be discussed in addition to hardware. So the total amount of Vitas and 3DS sold in Japan are as follows. The PlayStation Vita has sold about 670,000 units, while the 3DS has sold about 5.2 million units. In 2012 in Japan, the PlayStation Vita was unable to come anywhere close to 1 million units sold, while the 3DS has finished the year well north of 5 million units sold. And as it currently stands, the 3DS has sold nearly 8 times the amount of Vitas in Japan as opposed to just twice the amount of Vitas in North America. We don't have overall software totals for the Vita or 3DS in Japan, so I can't just provide some magical number for the overall software sales, but it's pretty clear looking at the charts that the 3DS, regardless of how much it outsold Vita hardware, the software is like tremendously lopsided on the 3DS's favor. If you look at any chart in the top 50, it's just dominated by 3DS hardware, not just versus Vita, but versus everything. It just destroys everything, much like how the 3DS, how the regular DS was doing around 2005, 2006, 2007, around those years. It's just dominating, and I suggest that will continue for quite a while. Vita games, when they do appear in the top 20 on the Media Crate Japanese charts, they only tend to make scant appearances near the end of the chart, like number 19 or 20 or something like that. There are some exceptions, such as Gravity Rush, which debuted at number 1 and has broken 6 figures, or Persona 4, which has debuted at 6 figures and stayed on the top 10s for a couple weeks, and has become the best-selling Vita title, and has certainly been profitable. But these are exceptions, not the rule, and the rule is a 3DS game on top of the charts almost at any given week. So it has been completely dominated in Japan. So what should we take away from this? Well, the Vita is currently in a tough spot, and that's absolutely undeniable, but it's especially in a tough spot in Japan, where it has been in the sales danger zone for many, many months. People saying that the Vita is being outsold by the 3DS a number of 10 to 1 or 6 to 1 or something like that. When people say that, it doesn't necessarily mean the Vita is doing bad. But when you look at the actual numbers, it is doing bad. Last week, for example, it sold just around 20,000 units, and that is that should be its biggest week of the year. It certainly was for 3DS, which sold over 400,000 units. So a user saying, like, for example, with PSP and DS, which, I was a big advocate that PSP wasn't really doing that badly in Japan, as people were saying, even though it was getting outsold by DS 6-1, it was still putting up respectable numbers like 50,000, 90,000, 100,000 in the holidays, where the DS was doing like 600,000 or something crazy like that. But just because the DS was doing extremely, extremely well, it doesn't take away from the fact that the PSP was doing really well in its own right. But this is not that situation. The 3DS is doing phenomenally. It's doing great. Probably not as high as the DS numbers were in the past, but that's fine. Vita is not doing anywhere near what PSP was doing. So, and it is definitely in what I would call the danger zone. Um, and there are certainly people, again, who say, especially some Vita apologists say that, gamers shouldn't care about sales. And, a true gamer cares about games and not sales. And to that, I would answer, sure, yes, like as gamers, we should care about quality games. You know, uh, Golden Abyss not selling as much as 50 Cent Bulletproof, for example, on PS2 does not mean that 50 Cent Bulletproof was the better game. It's not. Sales aren't indicative of quality, but what they are indicative of is what is going to launch on the system, what games are going to come out on the system in the future. And while low sales for Vita didn't necessarily hurt its software this year, you better believe it's going to have a definite effect on the next year. Um, they like Japanese support. If you pay attention to Japanese support right now, all we're seeing are just ports being thrown at Vita from various developers, such as Koei Tecmo throwing another Ninja Gaiden port, a Dead or Alive port, while 3DS got an actual original Dead or Alive game. Well, it was a compilation game, but it still was an original game. And we're going to continue to see that trend where we're going to see 3DS getting a bunch of exclusive titles, while Vita is going to largely get PS3 ports. Not that ports are bad, and I will talk about that later, but that's what we can come to expect, and that's a little concerning for people who really love Japanese games and love Japanese support to only see ports being easy ports being thrown at the system. And again, ports are better than nothing. Of course, I don't think the Vita will be abandoned. It still is a viable platform to release games on, but without hardware bolstering and getting better, we won't see that kind of exclusive content like how PSP had with Crisis Core and Dissidia, and eventually the Monster Hunter games started becoming exclusive. We won't see that unless hardware sales improve. I'm not saying we won't see any Japanese exclusives, because we will see some first-party studios from Sony step up, but for first and foremost, like, third parties just won't make an appearance. The second thing I wanted to talk about was for people to acknowledge and understand that media crate numbers, although they're conveniently released every single week and people love to quote them, especially people who like to be reductive about the Vita's sales, they like to quote them and say, like, oh, look how bad the Vita is failing. But what they fail to acknowledge is that the Japanese market isn't indicative of how these two systems are doing everywhere else in the world. If it was, the 3DS would already have like well surpassed almost PS3 numbers, if it's selling 400,000 units a week in every territory, but it's not. Vita is doing better in North America than it is in Japan. It's still being outsold by 3DS, but the ratio is about 2-1, not 8-1, and that's a big, big difference. Both 3DS and Vita are struggling in North America, and I don't think we're going to see much in the way of North American Western support in the way of both the platforms, unless Nintendo and Sony pony up the money to, or money changes hands behind the scenes or something like that. And this is concerning, again, for people who like Western games, like I do. It's a little scary because, as well as 3DS, or however well people think that 3DS is doing in Japan, it's not doing that. It has sold less than 2 million units so far, or around 2 million units for the entire year of 2012, which is less than half of what it sold in Japan, and Japan's a smaller market overall. So iPhones and Androids and everything have definitely made an impact and definitely decreased the selling capacity of both these systems, and it makes me worry a little bit about Western support. But anyway, I think that's things that we should be concerned about. For people that love Japanese games, if you have a 3DS, don't worry about it. They're going to continue to localize those games. If you have a Vita and only a Vita, it's time to worry, and it's time to really expect Sony to cut that price or do something drastic to get that support. If you love Western games, you should be worried about both these systems, not just the Vita. I would worry about 3DS as well, because both systems are failing to set the world on fire in North America. So now we're going to talk about game reviews. I've already given my personal list of the top games released on either platform for the year, which you can find in their respective videos. But that was my own personal opinion. In order to get a more holistic and objective view of the quality of software released on the 3DS and Vita, we need to analyze how well their respective games did in the reviews. So, in order to compare and analyze, I will use the meta-average site GameRankings.com. So I chose GameRankings as opposed to the other main website for this, Metacritic, because Metacritic has been known to put up scores on their game reviews where the score wasn't given. They'd see an alt-text review and give the game a score based off that. They've been known to do this, so it ends up skewing the results. And also, GameRankings is just better organized for searching and compiling results. But still, the results should be the same more or less depending on which site that you use. So most websites and game reviewers follow the scoring system of 6 being average, 7 being good, 8 being great, 9 being amazing, and 10 being a masterpiece. However, some do not, and any game that falls below an 8 to them is an average or worse game. In both of these types of systems, however, an 8 is a positive score, whether it means good or great. So this analysis will only include 3DS and Vita games which have an 80% or higher review average. I'll also on the side give a side statistic of how many have a 70 or up review average if that's what you're into. So also an important note that is that to be included on this list, a game has to be reviewed at least 10 times. It offers a much more well-rounded and meaningful average than a game which has only been reviewed a couple of times. So the results are as follows. For 3DS, it has 7 games released in 2012 with a review score of 80 or higher, and 22 games with a review score of 70 or higher. So since we're doing 80, we're going to look at this. We have them all right here. We have Colors 3D, Crashmo, Zero Escape, Kid Icarus, Resident Evil, Professor Layton, and Mutant Mudds. These are the 7 games which have scored 80% or higher on game rankings, or have an 80% or higher average. And of course, it has about 22 other games which have scored 70 or higher. But for the sake of the review, we're going to go with 80% or higher. So Vita, which I have up here on game rankings, has 18 games which have scored an 80 or higher on Metacritic and game rankings. So starting at the top with 94, it's Persona 4 The Golden, Rayman Origins, Little Big Planet, Mortal Kombat, Sound Shapes, Zero Escape, Tales from Space Mutant Blob's Attack, Cine Mora, Lumines, Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, Super Stardust Delta, Blaze Blue, Gravity Rush, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Plants vs. Zombies, Uncharted Golden Abyss, FIFA Soccer, and Wipeout 2048. If we include games that have scored 70% or higher, it has 32 games in total. So, basically, what this means is that the general consensus, according to these reviews, is that the PlayStation Vita has a much higher quality library released in 2012 than 3DS has, with over twice the amount of games having great review scores or higher in 2012. So, when confronted with this statistic, many 3DS apologists claim that although Vita has more overall games rated 80% above, the 3DS has more quality exclusives rated 80% or above. So to this I would say 2 things. First, no, it doesn't. Of the 7 games on 3DS which have an 80% or above average, 4 of them are exclusive to the system. Meanwhile, Vita has 7 exclusive games rated 80% or higher. So secondly, just because something is a remake, a multi-platform title, a port, or a game that you've just played before, or that has existed before, doesn't detract from its overall qualities and merits as a title worth owning. Not everyone has played every single title in existence, which is why ports and multi-platforms and remakes exist in the first place. And I would really ask anyone who treats portable games that exist on other platforms as non-games to really evaluate what they are saying. Are they saying it out of points? Do they want to score points on a fanboy war? Or what? Like really, it doesn't make sense. Like, I've never played Persona 4, before I played it on Vita, and to me it was a new game. And just because it was a port or a remake or however you want to classify it, doesn't mean that it's any less valuable. So what should we take away from this? Two things should be taken away from this analysis. First is that the 3DS's low amount of great games in 2012 is more of a function of timing than it is indicative of things to come. Certainly, if we used this Japanese reviews in this comparison, it would be enormously lopsided in favor of the 3DS. Many high-profile titles have been released in Japan and have reviewed tremendously over there, and have yet to come to North America. So many high-profile titles released in Japan will come to North America next year or in the future, which bodes well for the 3DS's game review analysis that I will do next year in 2013. This is pretty much a kind of transitionary year for 3DS, if you will. So that's an important thing to note. I don't like the 3DS having a somewhat disappointing year with only 7, well-received overall titles, especially in comparison to Vita, which has had 18, isn't really indicative of what's going to happen next year or the trends or anything. This is just a transitionary year for 3DS, in my opinion. So the second is that the Vita library is undeniably strong and only getting stronger as time goes by. The claims that Vita doesn't have good games and that that's the reason why it's not selling are really completely unfounded. Or they're just an extreme personal opinion and not indicative of what the majority of people think. And I feel that Vita's lower sales are really a function of its price, Sony's marketing, and the changing ecosystem in North America than its overall library. So this final and quick section will just talk about notable additions added to PlayStation Vita or 3DS in 2012. These additions could either be hardware or non-gaming software or other features and such. So PlayStation Vita has had a plethora of applications added in 2012 after launch, such as Foursquare, Facebook, Flickr, Twitter, YouTube, Music Unlimited, Skype, Netflix, and other applications. So these have really bolstered Vita as the all-in-one media device that it's trying to be, and kind of many of these applications too are the quality that you'd find on your cell phone. Actually, the Facebook app is much better than what I've seen on my Android phone. So the second really important thing that Vita added was its PlayStation Plus functionality, which mirrors its functionality on PlayStation 3, feature for feature. It was a really big hit and was received very well. On the 3DS side, it was pretty quiet in terms of applications and services, but it did significantly and successfully launch the 3DS XL, which addressed many of the criticisms of the original model, including battery life, screen size, and ergonomics. So what should we take away from this? We should take away that the Vita is clearly the device which we should expect more of in terms of the growth of non-gaming applications and services. So although the 3DS did have new hardware this year, it was Vita's first year, and to expect new hardware so soon would be rather silly. I don't feel that there is significant reason to hold out hope that apps such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Skype, and such will reach the 3DS. Despite the device being more than capable of handling them, as the system has been out for more than 2 years and we've yet to hear a peep from Nintendo about it, while Sony announced these well in advance for the Vita and we knew they were coming. So unless Nintendo just all of a sudden surprises us and puts them on the eShop, then I really, I don't think that they're coming. Nintendo also has a stance that they want to make money off everything they put up there, or most things. So releasing Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, or Skype on 3DS wouldn't really make them money. So I don't see them doing it. It's just their philosophy. They have to make money on everything that they do. So I don't see that coming. I don't think we should hold out hope. So I think that we should really expect the growth of these kinds of services and apps from Vita, but not expect it from 3DS. So now on to my favorite part, predictions, where I can list a bunch of things and be wrong about them and have people throw it in my face after. So I have 4 main predictions about Vita and 3DS. The first is that we should expect massive amounts of Japanese localizations on 3DS in 2013 and 2014, given the success of the platform in Japan. This should keep users with an affinity for Japanese games busy for a long time. Vita, on the other hand, will see quick localizations of PS3 ports or multi-platform titles, with the exclusive games coming out solely from Sony's internal Japanese studios. So my second prediction is that a price drop will hit the Vita, and it will be $199 or lower, and should happen in the first half of next year. And although we shouldn't expect it, I would also predict that Sony will begin to exchange money behind the scenes with larger Japanese developers to support the system. Um, do I smell a Monster Hunter port? Maybe. It would depend on Capcom and how much Sony is willing to pay for the development and pay for the advertising and bundle it in the system and pay Capcom and everything. I'm sure Capcom's going to milk Sony for all they're worth if Sony does come to them. But that's what they should be doing, and I expect them to be doing something like that. My third prediction is that more and more the highest rated Vita games will be smaller indie PSN exclusives. Not necessarily exclusive to the Vita, but maybe PS3/Vita. I say this because it's getting somewhat dangerous to make bigger games on the Vita. Really big or expensive games. I saw this PlayStation, actually, the PlayStation YouTube channel just released this video of the music in Soul Sacrifice and what it takes to develop the music, and that frightened me. There were hundreds of people in this orchestra, and this must have cost them millions of dollars just for the sound alone. And it worries me that I don't see them making that money back on this title, given the small user base of the Vita, unless Soul Sacrifice sets the world on fire. And don't get me wrong, I'm super excited about Soul Sacrifice, but we have to be real, it's not Monster Hunter. So those types of games, I have a feeling we'll see less and less of, while we're going to see more of really cool, smaller indie PSN exclusives coming to Vita and ranking highly. My final prediction is that Pokemon will be announced and dated for Japan, with a localization for the US coming in late 2013 and 2014. And I have two specific predictions with regards to Pokemon. One, it's going to be a game changer that many of us have been asking for. I don't think it's going to be 2D anymore. I don't think we're going to see sprites anymore. I think that we finally have the power with the 3DS to really show cool 3D animations. I think they're going to scale it back. I don't think there's going to be 700 Pokemon or whatever. Maybe it'll be the original 150 or something like that. Or maybe they'll make another 200 more. Because, of course, you can't... It's rough to create animations and 3D animations and everything for that many different types of Pokemon. So I really think that, and it's easy to do that with sprites, like, the way that sprites are kind of cheesily animated, you can add like hundreds of animations that are all the same there. So I really think that that's what's going to be the big game changer for a 3DS Pokemon. I don't think it's going to be sprites. I think it's going to be 3D with a 3D world to explore. My second prediction with regards to Pokemon is that it's going to be the booster shot that American 3DS sales need. It's going to increase hardware sales for that month and going to increase them for many other months. It's going to be like almost a permanent lasting effect for 3DS hardware, and Pokemon's really going to be that booster shot to get the 3DS back to closer to DS levels of what DS was doing at this time in its life in the past. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this channel this year. I hope that you've enjoyed portable gaming this year. Thanks for just subscribing to me, and thanks for supporting the channel and your constructive criticism and everything. I really, really appreciate it. So what I want to know is, what are your predictions for 2013? This is really fun, and I just want to hear what you guys think is going to happen to the two systems. Whether Vita's going to die in 3 months, or whether Pokemon's going to be 2D again. If you disagree with that, just let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear it. So happy New Year and happy gaming. Bye, guys.